letter I got from him when I was on vet's roll. I mean, you would think I was some kind of hero, but again, I'm just repaying my debt. That's why I never charged to teach judo. I have to repay my debt. Oh, that is... My uncle was Iwakuni. He was only about 4'10". He lived on Collins Road. We now know it as Riverside. The sports core and the ballpark are out there where his farm was. And in fact, I had originally was digging graves for 50 cents a day and room and board, but he ended up giving me a summer job, $75 a month and room and board. Again, he was my hero, and that's why I ended up going in the Marine Corps. High school was super great. Ended up transferring from East to Harlem, and when they found out that I wanted to wrestle, Clyde Peterson was the athletic director. He took time from his family to keep me off the streets and out of trouble. He took me to East and Hononegah. The inspiring part was he just made sure that I had a chance. He was the one that actually made me a productive citizen. We went to DeKalb for they called it the districts then you went to the sectionals. But he left me in a motel room by myself while he went to the coaches' seeding meeting. They would not seed me because I only had a 1-1 record. When the coach came back to the motel, he said, they wouldn't seed you. Some of those boys wrestled 30, 40 times, and you don't have a very good record anyway, so that's what it is. And I said, that's fine. And then he says, but you drew the #1 seed. I walked around the room. The hair stood up on the back of my neck, and I broke out in a cold sweat. And finally, I said, Coach, if I beat him, it'll be all downhill from there. He said, yes, that's a good attitude. There were the 13 teams. Harlem ended up having 8th place out of 13 teams. Not so much that only that I made a lot of points because you got advancement points, but you got extra points for pins and everything like that. And some of the teams were real weak, and some of the teams were real strong, so that's why it made the difference. Because some of the weaker teams didn't have somebody that was district champion. And I decided I wanted to be a good citizen, so that's why I decided to do my duty. It was my responsibility. I had a 6-year obligation to the United States of America. I had achieved my accomplishment of graduating out of high school, so now I was ready to make my mark, so to speak. Look out, world, here I come.
When recruits arrive at the Basic Combat Training Center, most of them are not up to the physical requirements of soldiering. Requirements that must include the ability to go all out for long periods of time in case of crisis or emergency. And the ordinary work of the military routine, vigorous though it may be, still cannot bring the men up to the necessary level of conditioning. That's why they need the benefits of the physical fitness program.
After completing basic training in Los Angeles, California, George was stationed in Iwakuni, Japan. Iwakuni is located in the southeast corner of the Japanese island, where supplies are managed and sent to troops in Vietnam. At Iwakuni, George was NCOIC of bulk storage, or the non-commissioned officer in charge. As NCOIC, George was in charge of a small group of men that would receive and send out supplies to troops in Vietnam.
When I got to Japan, that's when I took up Judo. In fact, it was the closest thing. I woke up sober one day and thought I better do something to amount to something. So I sat in front of the Judo dojo and watched. One day, my sensei shuffled over. He said, "Oh, I notice you have much interest. I hope you try. We need lightweight."
In de vliegermolen in Voorburg proberen de beste judoka's uit 9 landen elkaar op de mat te meppen met een beheerst geweld, waarvan de sierlijkheid vooral bij de vertraagde opname.
Judo is a fairly modern martial art that was founded by Dr. Kano and has basis in jiu-jitsu. Jiu-jitsu was founded in 1532 as a way to teach structure and methodical manner to students. Several years later, jiu-jitsu was refined by the samurai who made a lifetime study of martial arts. As the Meiji Restoration took over in 1868, martial arts began to decline. The Meiji Restoration did not support the violence of martial arts and instead supported the message of bettering the individual for the sake of the state. Jiu-jitsu, being the only martial art of the time that did not use weapons, was modified to be a team sport that could develop the individual and teach physical education rather than just self-defense. This new modified version of jiu-jitsu, developed by Kano, became Judo. Through the years, Judo continued to change to better fit the changing ways of society. Modern Judo has become a competitive sport in which the two competitors face off in a competition where mental strength is more important than physical strength and ability. George, with his skill and knowledge in wrestling, mastered the art of Judo while serving in Japan.
The sport Judo does not take into account size. Size doesn't matter. You have to utilize, if your size is the advantage, okay. If your speed is the advantage, okay. If your balance or position is the advantage, that's what you use. So I was never very good. I just didn't know other than to do what I was taught. I started the 10th of February in 1964, and by 3 weeks later they were going to fly down to Sasebo, which is the southern island of Japan, and they were going to we were going to fly in a seaplane and then land in the water. And I thought, oh, I'd really like to do this. Well, needless to say, in 3 weeks' time, I didn't know very much Judo, so I wrestled my way through to the finals, and the next morning, the second day, the big guy behind me was going to have to wrestle me, and he's standing in chow line behind me, and he said, "I hope that little guy tries to take me to the mat." I was Iowa State wrestling champion, and I'm thinking, ooh, well, I don't have any choice. I don't know that much judo. I can only do what I know. Well, he must have been using reverse psychology, because I ended up pinning him, but no skin left on my toes because the rice straw mats had chewed me up pretty good, because I spent all my time pretty much on the mat. The weekend after I got back, my sensei took me to Hiroshima for a judo tournament. 12-year-old boys, 85 pounds, they were about 50 pounds lighter than me, turned me every way but loose. I didn't have a chance. Anyway, he's sitting on the bus going back to Iwakuni, and he's not upset, so I'm thinking, well, he's not upset. Why should I be upset? I'm going to stick with this. I love it. Maybe someday I can beat them at their own game. By May, I was promoted to brown belt. They put us in a bracket of 7 people. You had to beat 6, or you had to beat 5. You could draw 1 match. You couldn't have any losses. Well, somehow I ended up winning all my matches, and my sensei had taught me the prearranged forms, the kata, and then he had to take me into the room where they did the written tests, and he had to read the Japanese off the blackboard so I could answer. And then by September, I got promoted to black belt, because they put us in a pool of 10. And you had to beat 8, you could draw 1. Well, wouldn't you know, again, I beat everybody except myself. But anyway, then I did a kata, and he must have been one of their best kata people. Anyway, they used the 2 of us to demonstrate how the kata was supposed to be done after everybody finished the test. The Japanese would always point to the building next door down below, because that's where they had the wrestling going on over there, because I was always doing wrestling techniques, and they wanted actually judo techniques. And a lot of the wrestling techniques are judo techniques, they just have a Japanese name. But some of the techniques I was using, they wouldn't recognize in judo. So they'd stop us and make us stand up and start over. Well, wouldn't you know, after I won my 5 matches for the brown belt, they had a great big boy, about 250 pounds, and I'm 135. And they're calling trite. They don't pronounce their L's. They sound like an R instead of an L. So finally the boys they're pointing at me and they're telling me, and I'm like, oh, well, my sensei isn't around and I don't know what's going on. And so I think, oh no, I have to fight one more. I can't let my sensei down. I have to beat this guy. Well, somehow I must have moved him just right, and I got him down on the mat and I pinned him. And the Japanese, usually you can't tell whether they're happy or just natural or what, but when I finished that match and came off the mat, he was headed my way and he was all smiles. So, and of course I'm telling him, I don't want to be an insult. Oh, no, he says. I said, well, I knew I had to win. He said, no, you don't have to win, only exhibition. But I went to Hong Kong twice. I got to fly all over the Mideast. I got to represent the Iwakuni on the judo team. They had boxing, they had a handball court, they had a weightlifting gym on the other side of the base. And so what happened was I had friends in the mess hall, so when I got involved in judo, I would go to work all day, but then I'd go by the mess hall, they'd hand me a sandwich or whatever, and I would go down to the judo dojo, and I'd be there hours before anyone was there to practice, but I wanted to learn my break falls and my rolls so that I could get a judo gi and be able to already mix it up and start getting into shape. And then I'd even maybe stay there after class, 10 o'clock at night, maybe I'd finally go over to the officers' mess by the flight line and get another sandwich or something, and then hit the rack and then get up and start all over the next day. So I was basically working, eating and living judo, and it was just a great life. But when they discovered where I was at, then I had to draw 782 gear, I had to draw a rifle, I had to meet inspections. Well, as luck would have it, when I was in the States, I had purchased an extra, setup of all my clothing needs, and I had had them all marked, stamped, folded, ironed and everything, and I had left them in my extra sea bag. So of course, when I had to make this inspection, if I didn't make the inspection, they were going to send me to Vietnam. Well, I had the best display because here it had been in that sea bag all those months, so it was still pressed perfect and with perfect stamps on it, and the brass was still shine. All I had to do was clean the rifle that they issued me and my 782 gear. Well, I ended up having the best display of anyone, so I wasn't going to Vietnam. But my sergeant that was over me, he was really shaken. He even told them when they issued my 782 gear, make sure there's no rust on it, make sure it's clean. He was more worried than I was. My last day in Japan, well, we left Iwakuni, and my judo sensei was leaving for Okinawa. He was going down to help somebody open up another judo school. And he said, "You have best souvenir." I said, "What do you mean, best souvenir?" "You have judo, very light, no customs. You will have forever," he said. I said, "Wow, I didn't think of it that way." I remember, I don't remember exactly where it was at. It was kind of like I blocked it out. But I remember getting spit on and being called a baby killer. I don't know what held me back. I was ready to fight for sure, yeah. That wouldn't have been just a pretty fight either. I'd have probably been out to kill. I don't know. It's a strange feeling.
After serving his time in Japan, George continued to learn and master judo. He used his skill to teach younger students, free of charge, the sport of judo. George also passed down his love for the sport to his children, who went on to become national judo champions and now own their own dojo, where they have continued to grow and expand on George's legacy. Through his careful teachings, George filled his lifelong goal of repaying his debt to those individuals like Clyde F. Peterson and his uncle, that have helped him succeed in his younger years. Being a judo mentor has allowed George to change the lives of many young students, as Peterson had done with him in the past. In his older age, George reconnected with his former Marines through Vets Roll, a program in which veterans tour Washington, D.C. with fellow veterans. George's emotional experience on Vets Roll and the appreciation from his family, friends, and former judo students that came with it left him changed forever.
What an emotional ride that was. The most impressive was the last stop. The man was a military man and he owned a restaurant. He gave us box lunches, but in the process, while we were there, he had these homeless military people that he'd taken in. 70% of his staff are homeless veterans. They were either druggies or alkies or what, but they put on a marching display. They sang for us. They played taps. And the poor guys, you know, they're trying, but he had a big heart. We're all a human being. I mean, one of my judo students was 6 years old. Justin Weeman teaches special ed at Hananiga. And he said, they're my kids, they're my students. That's how much pride he has. But he was one that, he not only took judo from me, he helped me dig graves, he helped split firewood, he ran with me, he did whatever odd job we had. I probably never paid him enough, but I tried to allow him to have pride. I allow him to have his soul. And to this day, I mean, the letter I got from him when I was on Vets Roll, I mean, you would think I was some kind of hero, but again, I'm just repaying my debt. That's why I never charged to teach judo. I have to repay my debt. Clyde Peterson kept me off the streets and out of trouble. If I could only, one person, if I could just help them, I hope I've repaid my debt.
I have heard plenty of stories of selfless heroes that have given their lives in order to help people. But I have never met a real-life hero until I met George. George's story is one of adventure, triumph, success, love, and never-ending strength. He is a truly outstanding man that has chosen to live out his life with only the well-being of others in mind. Every time I talk with him, I hear countless stories of people that he has helped throughout his life. It is so clear through my conversations with him and his persona throughout his interview that there is nothing more important to him than repaying his debt. But George has gone above and beyond repaying his debt. He has made himself into one of the heroes that most people only hear about, and through his stories, I have found my own inspiration to work to serve others and the community in the same way George has.